Right, my friends, we'll give it a bash and see if it works for take two. And I do hate this house, by the way, for what it's worth. Frustration. Nothing worse because I don't understand what's going on a lot of the time when these things happen. So I'm a technical idiot, like I've said many times. But I hope we're back, and I hope we can get stuck in and have a proper chat. I did get a screenshot of the super chats that were there before I finished, so I will get back to the super chats. I'll make sure I go through them as well for everybody who took the time and spent their money. I made sure just quickly before it went, I got a screenshot, so I'll do my best to take you through them. If you're watching this back later on, well, this is take two of the late night agenda, where I hope it works this time. We were solidly about 40 minutes into the last one, and all of a sudden the gremlins came in. But yeah, let's read out some of the super chats from the previous one anyway, to at least acknowledge the kindness of the people that sent them in. So Stevie Simpson said, Craig, love the attitude with the trolls, superb team Craig, let's get the Isak deal done. Well, thank you, that really means a lot, mate. I just don't have time for them, dude. I've got plenty of people in here who, want to be here with us, have a bit of fun with us and talk about the Reds, and they're the ones my focus will be on. John Not Henry said, Craig, thoughts on Luke Edwards? Look, I don't mind a bit of banter, like I said, from Luke Edwards about, back and forth at Liverpool fans. But when you've got a journalist writing for a newspaper on there, putting in the, monologue from Taken, saying I have a particular set of skills, yada, 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 and basically putting threats out there online, it's just a bit weird. So apart from that, it's just a bit of the fun of the fair. I don't think I'll be paying much attention to Mr. Edwards when this transfer window's open. On top of that, we had, I want 2-3 amazing signings and this window over, said Liz. Sunil said, I have a feeling we'll get Gay in January and Isak next summer for a significantly lower rate. Good thing we bought in Leone and keep a hold of Chiesa. I don't know necessarily if his price will get cheaper, as if a year went on, because he'd still have 2 full years on his contract at that point. So that's one aspect of this I never really knew the answer to be honest with you, Sunil. But yeah, it's an interesting point, and I guess I'd wonder what people would think on the price in a year's time. Scratching Claimer said, top striker, come through every year, forget Isak, north of 100 million is way too much. I don't think we'll get Gay. Canade must step up if this happens. For me, what's the account name again? Scratching Claimers. For me, the big problem with Canade is not anything except, will he sign the new deal? If he doesn't sign the new deal, I don't feel confident going into a new season with Canade running down the deal. I just don't like the optics of it. I don't like the thought process behind a player knowing his future is elsewhere and feeling he's going to give 100%. So for that one, that's the problem for me. I just would like that situation to be resolved. Stargirl said it's Saudi-run football TV media, sarcastic. Lolly said, hey Craig, always here in a different broadcast. We must stop the Isak move. We must stop Liverpool. They've become too strong. Is this the reason the price is too high? Or is it just jealousy? What do you think? Lolly, I don't know, dude. I don't know. But ultimately, whatever happens with Isak, we have put ourselves in the position where we don't have enough forwards in now. So Isak aside, whatever we have to do to make that right before the window shuts. Now, I did spot a good comment that I wanted to talk about before we came back live. And the comment was, Eze to Arsenal is arguably the signing of the window. I don't know if I will go quite that far as the poster, but it's a good signing that will concern me as a Liverpool fan. So that's the way I always think about our opposing teams' signings. Does it bother me as a Liverpool fan? Gyökeres didn't really bother me. It wasn't a signing that I thought is going to be the difference between us or Arsenal. But Eze, on top of Zubamendi, on top of a good cohesive team already, that does concern me. And I do think that is a signing for Arsenal that has maybe tipped things slightly back more towards even, or maybe even in one's favour slightly. But it's a really good piece of business, and it's one that I hope our club answer in the market, because, we need to make our own attacking statement in this window. TG said, I'd love to see... Why isn't this one coming up? There we go. I'd love to see a 4-4-2 if we get Isak. Much love. Be interesting to see what the formation would be. I don't know if we'd see a 4 4-2, or if we'd see a 4-3-3 maybe with Ugo Ekitike in off the left-hand side. But look, chance would be a fine thing if we get the players in, right? At least we'd have the headache of what to do with them. Christopher said Liverpool warned Newcastle if they didn't sell us Isak, they will go in for Ekitike. They said not a chance, and now look. Exactly. We did say it, and I remember doing it on stream, Christopher, as well. And it's what makes the whole situation even more galling, right? Because I've never known whether Ekitike would have gone to Newcastle or not. Only the man himself could answer that question. But we did know at that point in this process, Liverpool were seemingly willing to allow Ekitike to go to Newcastle to get Isak. But let's just say that had have happened, right? And Newcastle signed Hugo Ekitike and we got Isak. We'd still need another player. We'd still, I guess, be sitting here in the same situation numerically as we are now. But you're right. We did say to them it was going to happen if we didn't get Isak, and it's kind of what happened, isn't it? Izaz, excuse me, said, Craig, Arsenal will have spent 260 million and sold for 6 or so million. If they win the title, is it a bought title? For reference, we've spent 290. Look, for me, if these clubs are doing these things, so how much money Arsenal spend or don't spend, as long as it's in the rules, they're free to do what they want. If they can afford to do all this business within the PSR constraints, absolutely no problem with that. They're entitled to spend their own money the same way we are. So, I would never throw around the bought title thing because I want my club to do as much as we can in the market within the rules. So, I certainly won't be labelling that accusation at Arsenal, but we know that the rules are a bit different when it's Liverpool. People like to say anything to undermine anything that we do. When we look at last season, you had people undermining us winning the league again by talking about it being a PGMOL title for some reason, and I don't remember being too happy with the PGMOL last season. Right. There's one more poll I wanted to run. Right. So I want to ask you this. It was a question that somebody put into the chat, and I thought it would make for a good poll, so bear with me. Right, so the way I've tried to pose this is, if we sign no more players, is this still a great window? Yay or nay? Now, for me, to kick us off on that one, if we don't do the bits of business we need at the end, no, this isn't a great window. And this hasn't been a leap forward as we'd hoped at the start of it, because the whole window in itself and all the business needs to be taken into account. And if we don't get the situation resolved for another attacker, I certainly don't think this is a good window, because I don't think we've strengthened in every area we've needed to. We asked, would we look at this window in September and think that everything that was done, every position we need to be strengthened in was strengthened and backed up, and it simply hasn't been yet. So for me, it would be a no. Billy Bob. Newcastle fans, journalists are exploiting your capacity to be outraged for clicks. The club's inadequacy to complete a transfer is being protected by shifting the focus onto Isak villainous behaviour. Absolutely, Billy Bob. I've said this all the way through. I don't see the same energy for Victor Gyökeres. I didn't see the same energy for Visa. And you're right. It is being exploited by everybody because Liverpool's name is a big one and this is a big story. I get it. I understand it. We all have to play the game, but nobody seems to be willing to actually think about the player in any of this, which really does concern me. Because, if I was driving into work and I was being shouted at abusively by a load of people, kids or not, I don't know if I'd be returning tomorrow or if I'd just say, sod this, I can't be bothered. Why? Something needs to be done here. And I really, 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 really do not understand the upside of not selling him for Newcastle. Like, do they think it makes them look strong? As I was trying to say before, I don't think it does. It just makes them look stubborn. And is Stubborn going to attract the next Isak or the next Sesko? No. All you've done here is say, we are going to make it very difficult for any player who wants to take the next step in his career. That's my take on it. But look, for me as a Liverpool fan, like I said, my interest is our club doing the best we can. And at some point, if this isn't looking like it's a doable thing, we got to move on. Right, where are we at? This one. So, James Pearce said, a Johan Visa or a Strand Larsen signing would not meet the conditions Newcastle mentioned. They would still require an elite striker or one with that potential to join besides. Plus, a massively increased offer from Liverpool. The club do not feel both will happen in the window's remaining 13 days. So, when James Pearce says the club do not feel both will happen, is he speaking about Newcastle not feeling that will happen or Liverpool's? I presume he means Newcastle. Because for us, this is a problem of our own making. And let's be honest about that. It is. We sold Darwin, we sold Diaz. We sold Doak. We have cleared the ranks to bring in a forward. Now we got to do and bring one in. So it's a risky strategy. You know, it's not mission impossible for Liverpool, but it very much is a frustrating mission at this point because we need to get cracking because the season's at stake here. Like, I know I said this earlier on and maybe you weren't with us for the earlier attempt at a stream, but if we don't bring in another elite forward, I don't think there's a hope in hell of us winning the league. Maybe a Champions League if you get lucky with a draw and, you know, you can find your way through with no injuries, but we don't have the depth to win a Premier League, in my opinion, with what we have now. And I don't know how anybody with good intentions could say we do. We have a front three and Chiesa as a backup who wasn't played and isn't match fit yet and will take a while to get up to speed. A young Rio Engamoa. And that's pretty much it. Outside of Salah, Gakpo, Ekatike. I'm just not seeing the depth in attack. So I don't see how we could realistically think we're going to win a league when Salah be at the AFCON for 6 games. And we already knew that. So for me, this is a problem with our season. You know what? I've always said I'm easy with Isak. If it's Isak or somebody else, I don't mind as a fan. But nobody isn't an option. Nobody really isn't an option. Szoboszlai can play up front if needed. But none of that's good enough. Like, let's be honest. It's not. Shoehorning players into positions when you've had a year to prepare for this window isn't good enough. It's not good enough. Now, look, like I've said, the window isn't closed yet, and there's still time for this to sort out. But we need to make a definitive decision to either put another offer in for Isak or move on to another target. We cannot collapse our entire season because of stubbornness. You know, they planned this window. They had a year. We were patient. We were promised. We were told this is going to be a big window. This is going to be a special window. We've made some good signings, but we've also sold a lot of players and brought in a lot of money. And I'm not seeing the squad depth to win a Premier League personally as we sit here right now. We're trying, bro. We're trying. Mohammed John said, if we get Alvarez and don't sign Isak, are we the bad guys? There is the human aspect of that, Mohammed John, like you've said, bro. You know, if you were to leave Isak stranded. But again, it's not in our hands, I guess, is it? You know, what I would say, mate, is I feel we owe it to Isak to at least put another bid in. Like, if we don't go back with another bid, yeah, I can understand the standpoint of have we left them high and dry. But to some extent, it was always going to be reliant on Newcastle doing their business and getting a player in. And, of course, us meeting a valuation that they were happy with. But it's a good point you've raised, you know. But what I can't mentally accept, mate, is, you know, a Virgil van Dijk scenario where we go back from again in the future. No problem with us revisiting Isak in the future if needs be. But we can't do it at the expense of another player for this season. That will just leave us in in a mess. Stephen, how are we, dude? Stephen Oglesby, thank you, mate. Said Newcastle talking heads are just stupid. There's no... Look, one thing that this situation, Stephen, has really shown me is that they aren't ready for the big time yet as a club and as a fan base, because it's been hilarious to see some of the responses from the Newcastle fans talking about the whole country of Saudi Arabia being upset that Isak put out that statement last night. I mean, talk about taking liberties. It's mad. Relaxing mind music. I could do with a bit of that right now, dude. I really could. Said, had enough of Newcastle. We should get Gay and Fofana or Rodrigo done and go back for Isak next summer. You see, that I get. Yeah. I don't know what this is about. I'm a Scouser, lifelong Liverpool fan. He's not what we stand for. We're better than them. Do you stand for learning how to spell the word what? Because, you know, I'd appreciate a lot more if you can spell the word what. And David, we are better than them. Don't be afraid to say it, mate. When you're the most successful club in English football history, you know, let me just put this little prick in his place. That's not what we stand for, right? But the Anfield Rap put a banner out on the road to Manchester just to remind them that, you know, they're the most successful team in English history. You know, born and bred Scousers, bro. But, you know, I know you're an idiot. You know you're an idiot. But you wanted to have a pop at me and you disguised the old, I'm a Scouser and this idiot doesn't stand for us. Try harder. Because like I said, the Anfield Rap lads, brilliant sense of humour, brilliant banner. And again, nothing wrong with being proud of being the most successful club in English football history, dude. Embrace the fact. Don't be a little bitch. Anyway, Relaxing My Music said, had enough of Newcastle. We should get Gay and Fofana, Rodrigo done and go back. And also, if you are a Scouser, I don't give a fuck where you're from, dude. It doesn't matter to me. You don't get to tell me jack shit, Pedro. Nothing. I live my life how I want, regardless of you and your L postcode or whatever the fuck else you think is important to you. It means twiddly shit to me. So, yeah, off you pop. Where are we? We should get Gay and Fofana. I see, the thing about that, mate, for me is, right, Fofana would be okay. It would be okay to go and revisit again. But I don't think Fofana is good enough. Like, we're talking about Isak as the calibre of player. So if we don't go back for a calibre player like Isak or, you know, a bona fide star, again, we've reverted back to type of the 30, 40 million quid players, and it's just not good enough at this point, to be quite honest. I see the Geordies are back in, resorting to their usual personal insults in the chat, little bitches. Just admit I live rent-free in all of your heads, you little clowns. It's okay. You look like Mr. Potato Head. Never heard that one before. Come back with some original banter, you little bitch. But, much like your club, you haven't got a clue what's going on, fella. Right. Would you be happy with a Rodrigo and a Gay? I would be, but... Look, I would, yeah. At this point, mate, I would. I'd be happy with a Rodrigo, yes. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect. You know what? I'll be honest and say I'm worried. I'm worried that if it isn't Isak, we're screwed. Because, like, who is the plan B now? You know, we can talk about Rodrigo and look, it will be an option, definitely. But, I don't know, man. It's feeling like viable options are thin on the ground at this point, if it isn't Isak. So, you know, if you look at least when I've been streaming over the past few months, when I've spoke about moving on players, your Darwins, your Diaz's, your Dokes, I've always said there surely is a plan, right? There's got to be a plan, because we're letting all these players go out the door. And they might not be players we think are ultimately good enough, but they are players who are experienced and will give us options. So if you're moving them all out, you best have replacements ready to go, or replacements that you can get over the line, because if not, we've sabotaged ourselves. Joseph said, if I had to pick any forward, I'd go for Yildiz. Good player, mate, good player. Interesting shout, Joseph. Yeah, good shout. I've not seen much to suggest that it might be possible, but it is a good shout and he's a very good player. Nedge Urban Sport said, after a promising start, getting annoyed window now. Arsenal signed Gay 6 hours. We pissing about weeks over Gay. Just got 25 million fringe player. We've been dicking about quite a bit around the centre back issue, whether it's not getting a commitment from Ibrahim Kanate on his future or not pushing ahead and pivoting to Mark Gay. We do need to make some type of decisive action in my mind here, because I know people will say we can go into a season with Kanade with 1 year to go and sign Mark Gay on a free in a year's time. I hate having a player that doesn't want to be here being part of the starting 11. You know, if you don't see your future at the football club, I, as a fan, don't believe you're going to give it all on the pitch. I know people will always, run out with their professional lines, but they're also humans. And if you have a huge move down the line, I just don't buy you're going to leave it all out there on the pitch. I just don't. And Canades look rocky at best at the start of this season. And I can't say whether that's because of Diogo, whether that's because of his future, whether it's just early season jitters. I don't know. But I do know, as a fan, I'm concerned that we have again not sorted it out all summer. And you feel like if he wanted to sign, he'd have signed by now. So if he doesn't want to sign, go get Mark Gay. Stevie Simpson said, one last opinion for tonight, Craig. Surely when we talk about bodies, surely we hold on to Harvey. I'm pretty sure he would prefer to stay at Anfield. So even tonight, mate, it looks as if the Elliott deal is still one that Liverpool are briefing that they're happy to go ahead with. So there was a report earlier from Plettenberg talking about it, and then there was a couple of other reports from journalists saying that it's one Liverpool will sanction if the number's right. So it feels like that's one that's still going the direction of, if RB Leipzig come up with a number, he'll be sold. So that would be another one out. And I'm okay with the Elliott one in particular on its own in isolation, because, like I said, I seen it as Wirtz coming in, being a big upgrade on Elliott, and Elliott maybe gets a couple of years under his belt and potentially we buy him back, or we put that buyback clause in. But Wirtz for the here and now was the star improvement. So I was always okay with that one. But again, we find ourselves as fans now kind of scratching around mentally to figure out, can we save this? With players who didn't really have roles last year, all of a sudden trying to convince ourselves they're going to be the saviours this year. I just don't see it. Ian said, well, I want Isak. Spiteful me would love if Newcastle reject us. Isak sits out and he goes somewhere next year for a ton less on offer and Newcastle lose out. So Ian, for me, mate, Newcastle have lost out on this. No matter what happens, this has been a poor situation for them. Because even if, as you said, he goes somewhere else in a year or he stays there, Newcastle have told the rest of the football world now, don't send your players here. They've told agents, if you think your player can come here for a few years and move to a bigger club, well, don't bank on it. That's what I would take from this window, from a Newcastle perspective. That, and it looks like they couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery. It looks like whoever's running things behind the scenes, day to day at the club, hasn't got their ducks in a row prepared for this window. Because remember, Isak told them a long time ago that he wanted out. And they've done nothing to make sure that they moved quickly and got their players in. And the Ekatike situation was right there in front of them. And they still tried to be smart arses. And then they lost Ekatike. So it will bite them in the backside over time, Ian. I've no doubt about that. Emmanuel, thank you, mate. Appreciate you. Hey Craig, Isak jersey sales alone can cover the difference in valuation. It might be worth considering the 150 million just to put Newcastle in their place. So, as a fan, Emmanuel, I'll have my own thoughts on a fee, and I don't think we should pay 150. But as a fan, if it brings the player in, like I've always said, it's not my money. It's if the club can, like I just mentioned about Arsenal, if the club can afford to do these things, would I rather have the player and pay an extra few million than not? Of course I would. But it feels like a mad number. It does, man. It feels like a mad number. But you know what else winds me up? It's some of the coverage of the 110 to 120 million pound offer from the likes of Henry Winter and others talking about it as an insult. That really just everyone's lost their mind. Potentially top three, maybe the biggest in British transfer history, and it's been spoken about like we offered them 40 million quid. Now, nothing about Newcastle offering 35 million plus 5 for a 60 million pound valuation player from Brentford. I don't see all the fuss about that in the media. But Liverpool, derisory offers, low ball offers, fuck off. It's 110 to 120 million pound, potentially the biggest transfer in British football history. And some people are trying to make out like Liverpool are trying to nick him for nothing. It's madness. And the coverage of it has been completely biased and one-sided from so many people. And I don't mean fan accounts. We're all supposed to be like this. Newcastle fans, Liverpool fans, me. Yeah, we're all lose our heads and go over the top. That's what we do. It's emotional to us. We're fans. But some of the coverage has been crazy. Stephen said, if Isak were to request a transfer, could Liverpool reimburse his loss as part of his contract? Yes. So, good point. I mentioned last night, Stephen, I don't know if you were with us, my friend, but I mentioned last night that if I was in Isak's shoes, there's no way I'd be putting in a transfer request. And let me explain why. In his mind, it's either 18 months to a season, so 18 months to a year, that he feels he's due a pay rise. So even if he just take it at a year, in that year, he'd probably due a pay rise. He wants about 300 grand a week. I think maybe Newcastle fans can help me out on this. I think he's on about 140 at the minute. So if that's 150 million or 150 grand a week valuation over a year, that's £7.5 million that he feels he could have had over the last year. And that's just 1 year. If you go back 18 months, obviously it's more. So he's taken that hit psychologically, financially. So if he puts in a transfer request, he loses loyalty bonuses, I believe, that would be due, and I think a percentage of the sale, but don't quote me on that. So it would definitely hit him in the pocket. Why is this gobshite spamming SA to Arsenal? Yeah, we know, mate, and we've talked about it loads. It's a good sign. It's a really good piece of business for Arsenal. But yeah, so that's why I wouldn't do it in his shoes. But could Liverpool make it work financially? Yeah, I'm sure they could, if they so wished. Give him a sign-on bonus, or up his wages or something along those lines, mate. Yeah. Brentford rejected Newcastle's bid. So there's a thought process tonight that, and again, I'm not saying this is a fact, but that Brentford don't want to sell to Spurs. They want to, the Brentford don't want to sell to Newcastle. They want to sell to Spurs because of the good relationship there with Thomas Frank and the future. I don't know. I'm not following the transfers enough to know what the stance is there, but it definitely feels like Brentford haven't enjoyed dealing with Newcastle on it. I think that's fair enough. Russell Bland, how are we, sir? Lovely to see you again. Said Alexander the Great is not so great. Liverpool sign players based on character, not Instagram. Ekatike is our number 9, enjoying your content. So, without fully knowing what you mean by what you've said there, mate, I'm gauging you mean Downing Tools, and what he's doing now is not the type of character of player that Liverpool would like. Again, if I'm wrong on that, mate, I apologise, but this is what I'm interpreting from your post. Let's not be hypocrites about it. Virgil done it, and Virgil came, and I think we can say that one went quite well. And it happens many, many times. It's a last resort. It's the nuclear option in these scenarios. And I guess maybe you looked at the PFA awards last night and thought, well, this is a natural way for me to, thank people for including me in the team of the year and a few other things. But I don't think it'll be something that Liverpool question his character as a person, mate. For me personally, I don't think it will. Where are we at with this? So, if we sign no more players, is this still a great window? 53% say no, 47% say yes, which is interesting. For me, no is the answer in that one, because you have to look at the whole window together. And like I've said earlier on, I cannot complain about any one of those signings individually. They're brilliant signings, but in a whole, it's not enough without adequate amounts of bodies to play in each position, and we haven't got that at the minute. Tipsy Dipsy said Liverpool should test Newcastle with a new bid, and if they reject it again outright, then we should move and back off. I agree. So as soon as I seen that statement last night from Newcastle, which, by the way, I don't think I got a chance to read out to you guys last night, so let me read it out here to you now. You've probably seen it, but just in case you haven't, this was the Newcastle statement. We are disappointed to have been alerted to social media posts by Alexander Isak this evening. We're clear in response that Alex remains on the contract, with no commitment has ever been made by a club official that Alex can leave Newcastle this summer. We want to keep our best players, but we also understand players have their own wishes and listen to their views. As explained to Alex and his representatives, we must always take into consideration the best interest of Newcastle United, the team and our supporters in all decisions. And we've been clear that the conditions of a sale this summer have not transpired. We do not foresee those conditions being met. This is a proud football club, a proud traditions, and we strive to retain our family feel. Alex remains part of our family and will be welcomed back when he's ready for his team to rejoin his teammates. That's a kind of nothing statement to me that doesn't really do anything about what happened last night. The family feel to it, I think people are losing the time frame of what actually happened here, right? Because it's all very well and good throwing around phrases like Isak's refusing to train and da-da-da-da-da. But let's look at the actual time frame. What happened? He was with Newcastle in pre-season up at Celtic to play a game, right? Eddie Howe put him out of the team because he said his head wasn't right. After that, the whole thing snowballed. Didn't go on the pre-season tour of Asia. Took it upon himself to go over and train in Real Sociedad. And then there was the whole stuff about the thigh injury or not, which always seemed like it was far-fetched. And then came back. And then there was another option to reintegrate him in with the family day and the barbecue. Didn't take up that option. So I think people need to have a bit of balance here. This he's refusing to train stuff is bollocks. He's up there training every day at 3 o'clock. He's not training with the rest of the team, but again, that's a decision. That's a decision for Newcastle. So again, I feel like there's been a lot of thrown Alexander Isak under the bus without some balance in the situation. And from a human perspective, and yes, from a selfish perspective as a Liverpool fan, you have to think of the human side of this as well. He's been driving into work getting abused, shouted at by children, called a greedy bastard, called a rat, seen his jersey burned, seen banners and flags. Where's the family feel of that, Newcastle? It's easy to put out a fucking nonsense statement that preaches everybody knows what to say to sound great, but your actions are what's important. Everybody knows how not to be a racist, how not to say racist things. But if we go about our lives with racist tendencies doing these things, but saying behind, oh, I'm not a racist, it doesn't mean anything. Now, of course, I'm not saying there's any racism at play here. But what I am saying is the statement's bollocks. The family feel nonsense is absolutely that nonsense because the player is being left high and dry with no thought for the human side of it. None. And to get back to what I was saying, I would have put that second bid in last night straight after that statement. That would have been the thing for me to go and put the bid in if I was Newcastle. Liverpool, sorry. This one. Mark said Algerian Mohamed Amora has been looked at again. He's around 33 to 40 million. I mean, again, though, it's not an Alexander Isak style make your opponents fear what's happening type signing, is it? You know, it's another meh type signing, and this summer wasn't supposed to be about meh type signings. It was supposed to be about top class, here and now, ready to go. Eddie said, I don't think we sign anybody. That's the worst case scenario, Eddie, for me in this, mate. Yeah, that's the worst case scenario, Eddie, and I won't be able to hide my anger if it goes that way, unfortunately. David said, I understand how the fan base is feeling, but in my 49 years supporting Liverpool, I still think this is the best window. Still 2-3 short. But I get it. Of course I get it, David, because the signings we've made have been good. I have to look at it holistically, and I just don't see how this has moved us on. It's brought in good players, but we don't have the depth. And we'd still have a situation where we could be at the likes of a Plymouth in the FA Cup again, fielding a hope it works team. And that wasn't supposed to happen this summer. So fingers crossed that we do get the signings we need before the window shuts. But it's starting to look more and more worrying as each day goes by. What is the net as it stands? So I'm working off memory here. I think it's about, what is it? Ben Doak's fee. I want to say it's about 80. Off the top of my head, I don't have everything open in front of me, but I think it's about 80. But either way, even if it's 100, say, not great for the big change everything summer. Double L line, how are we, my friend? So, love you, Craig. Do you have faith FSG will sort this? So I don't think this is on FSG. You know, they are the owners. So ultimately, yes, I do think they overall take responsibility because they are top of the food chain. But this has been for Edward Hughes to sort out. And, you know, we've seen that they have the ability to go out and bring in big players and convince big players to come. And everybody that Arna speaks to as well makes a very good impression on them. So I'm still not at the point yet where I've lost faith that the window can be sorted out, because I've been very impressed with the way Richard Hughes has operated in this window and the work that he's got through. It's been very good. But we've got to finish it. You know, we can't just do 70% of the job and think that's good enough. It isn't. Especially when Manchester City are going to be stronger again this season than last season. Arsenal out there tonight making a big statement, agreeing the deal for Eberechi Eze. That's a good player for them to bring into their team. And that's, you know, we got to compare apples and apples, and we got to do more. It feels to me like this is not just Newcastle not wanting us to have Isak. It feels like loads of the Premier League teams are buying Newcastle targets to stop us buying. So be it, you know. It's war, man. It's football, you know. It doesn't need to be niceties. It's business. So if they're doing it, then we got to find a way to look after our own interests, you know. And so if and look, it's a hypothetical, but if it is happening in that way that you said, well, we just got to find a way to plough through and look after our own interests. Oshin said, Craig, Transfer News Live said that Liverpool are waiting till after Monday. Yeah, so Transfer News Live don't break stories. They're just an aggregator from what I can understand. And the £130 million thing has been, it's been spoken about for a while. But here's what I don't understand, right? There's no mad need to do it. What is of benefit to us to wait till Monday? Do we think if we wait till Monday, the atmosphere is going to be any better at St James's Park on Monday night, or Newcastle fans are all of a sudden not going to be annoyed at Liverpool and not going to be frustrated. Doesn't make any difference. So for me, clock's ticking. Get moving. If you want to put the bid in, do it now and give yourself wiggle room. Not on Tuesday when there's only 6 days to go. It just doesn't make any sense. You know, because like I said, Newcastle fans aren't going to forget about everything by Monday, no matter what happens now. Where are we at? So, Sameh Ishmael, how are we, my friend? One of the first, I don't think we've had too many Egyptian super chats, my friend, so lovely to see you in. This is getting ridiculous now. How long will Liverpool wait for Isak? Attacking depth is almost non-existent. Defensive depth is worrying. Leone is just a kid and Gomez is always injured. Need 2 signings. I don't have any notes for you, my man. I kind of agree with what you've said. So is Rio Wengamoa just a kid. And we've already seen that Arna at the moment doesn't feel like when the chips are down, he can turn to Rio in the league or in the Community Shield or in the first game of the season. Rio wasn't the option he turned to on the bench, so I refuse to believe going forward that he will be. Nor probably should he have to be. He should be brought through at the right pace for his development. So I agree, mate. We've made this bet ourselves. We've got to go and figure out a way to put it right. And like you've said, I don't know how long we continue to go down this Isak route, especially without putting in that second bid. Like, what are we waiting for here now? Newcastle to what? Open up the doors and say, come on, lads, we need your dough? No, just make the offer and, you know, see what happens. And most likely it gets rejected. And then, well, we have to move on. Scratching Claimer said, struggling with the idea that a 90 mil player will be Isak's backup. Both aren't wingers, in my opinion. Isak's we need a top winger, must buy defence. Defence don't fear us. So, is that in relation to Hugo Ekitike, who's 70 million, if I remember correctly? And look, to be fair, Arna brought him in, and always the narrative or the line had been that he's a multifaceted forward who can play in the 9, play in a wide position, play in a 2. So I don't think it was going to be a backup. You know, we always as fans have this tendency to just think starting 11, but we can't think that. We have to think 2 games a week, keeping players fresh, keeping the intensity high, levels not dropping. And for that, you need 2 quality players in every position. And I'm sure that we can find ways to put Isak and Ekitike in the same team if it comes off. Aaron said, Liverpool's first approach for Isak was the 15th of July. It'll be 21st of August in an hour or so. That's a lot of time wasted. Thoughts? Well, yeah, of course it is. But, you know, I can only assume, mate, that they thought this situation would resolve itself and that Newcastle would, at the very least, get their forwards in, and then maybe they can test the resolve again. And if they say no at that point, move on. But what we've ended up having a situation happening where Newcastle aren't, as of yet, able to attract their forwards in, which means, of course, kind of still as you were with regards to the potential of moving Isak on. And we've always said, despite people talking about the 99.9% stuff, I've always said the big caveat there is that Newcastle have to get players in. And they haven't. They haven't brought one striker in yet. They're still trying to get Visa, but the odds of them getting a second big one in are looking pretty slim. And then, you know, we'd have to see all that happen and then Liverpool to go in and then get it done. It just doesn't seem too feasible at this point. Merlin said, Visa, 45 million Isak signs, Newcastle United FC, PSR flip will look sick. I don't know what happens with Visa at this point. You know, I think he wants Newcastle, but if Brentford want to push him towards Spurs, you know, it's still a good move for him, isn't it? And still a good club. I'm only concerned about Liverpool in all of this scenario. I don't care what happens with Newcastle. I don't care what happens with Brentford. I don't care what happens with Spurs. I do care what happens with us, because ultimately it's our season on the line. Phil, thank you, Phil, for your super chat, mate. Appreciate you. Said, if you spend hundreds of millions but are still short of the tools you need to win and things and defend your title, you've already wasted those millions. To somewhat, I agree. But we haven't done our job. If you don't go out there and get all the players we need signed, we haven't done our job, because the manager's still going in with a hand tied behind his back against, like, look at Arsenal's depth now, if they were to get Eze in, like, right across the park. Good quality in most positions. We did a great start to the window, bringing in absolute quality. Like, there's no filler signings there for me in what we've brought in. All very good caliber, ready for now signings, but just not enough. Itachi. At that point, we should bid 140 million and then everyone's shuts the F up. So, what would you guys do? In the chat now, what would you do if you were Liverpool? If you're Richard Hughes right now, how do you deal with this situation with Isak? Do you put in an offer now, see if it's rejected, move on? Do you sit tight and keep hoping that Newcastle's resolve softens? So people saying pay the money, it's not that simple. The money is part of this, but the money alone isn't going to get it done. So I think even if, like, let's say we got to the 150, which we shouldn't, but let's say we did, I don't think Newcastle sell at that point because they still haven't got their own player. So the money is a big part of it, but it's only a part of it. So I'd certainly test the water and at least get the conversation going. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like we're clutching failure from the grasps of brilliance in this window so far, and I'm expecting a response from Hughes and Edwards. So I expect them to get cracking. I can't imagine they'll be just sitting on their hands now. I'd imagine they have to be working somewhere on something. Chris said, Craig, love the channel. Sorry if you've already covered this. Do you think the Isak deal gets done this summer? As each day goes by, it's looking less and less, Chris. And again, it won't be from the want of Liverpool to do it. If you want me to point the finger of blame in this deal and why it fall apart, it's because Newcastle have been an absolute shit show in being able to attract their targets. All the way back to Lindelap, Mbomo, Ekitike. It's just gone one failure from Newcastle after another. And somehow in some of their warped fans' minds, they're going to win this scenario by keeping a player that won't give a shit. I've never understood that. Like, for me, and you can watch back any stream I've done where I've spoken about this, I've always said, I don't want any player at Liverpool that doesn't want to be here. Why would you? You want everybody pulling in the same direction and fighting for the cause. So if this was us, I'd be saying, get the lad out, sell him, move on, get somebody else. But I'd know that our boys would be able to go and get somebody else. At the minute, it doesn't look like Newcastle's recruitment team are able to do that. So the Article 17 thing, put it out of your mind. It's not applicable. Anybody who's talking to you about Article 17 doesn't know what they're talking about. So put it out of your mind. It's not going to happen. It's not relevant here. There's too many caveats and opening yourself up to legal recourse. So just forget about the Article 17 stuff. I've tried to put this to bed so many times when it's come up. And I know people who are talking about it with the best of intention, but it's not feasible and it's not applicable to this situation. So it's a statute that allows players under a very specific set of criteria to buy themselves out of their contracts. It doesn't apply when you just don't want to be there. You can't just go, well, I'm off, I'm going to pay up my contract. Because what about the transfer fee? So if Isak, let's say, buys himself out of his contract and pays up the last 3 years of his wages, you think Newcastle are just going to watch him go and sign for Liverpool and not go, well, we own his registration, what the fuck? Of course they're not. They're going to take Liverpool to court. They're going to sue for loss of earnings. They're going to take Isak to court. And the whole thing will just become a huge, massive mess. So, yeah, just put it out of your head. It's just not going to happen. And correctly, not going to happen. And again, for all the people saying, what's Article 17? You know, if you put those words into Google, you'd get the answer. Same as I had to do to find out about it, in fairness. Where are we at? This one from Elmere. Said, hey Craig, just joined. Are we still living rent-free in the small club's head? Oh, definitely, mate. Definitely. Last night was peak for me, Elmere. The mouth of the Tyne account who talked about Isak shitting on a whole country. That was peak for me. Like, that was it. Whatever else happens in this window, that one post, I'm going to smirk about that forever, because that summarised the entire fan base to me in one post. Absolute delusion personified. Pinar Javi flew into London today. Rodrigo deal on. Well, I'd love that to be the case. I've no idea. Honestly, have no idea if Rodrigo is a feasible option or not. I'm not in the loop, so I couldn't tell you. Would be very relieved. Because if you got Rodrigo in, you could revisit Isak in 6 months or a year, having brought in a multifaceted forward who can play across the front line. And then I would say in a year's time, you'll also know then what happens with Chiesa. So Chiesa hasn't really worked over the season. Then maybe you can move on Chiesa and go get Isak in. You have an Isak, Rodrigo, Ekitike, Gakpo, Salah. So, yeah, let's wait and see. Had we kept Diaz and Kwanzaa, problem solved? Not really, Danny. On the Diaz one, I get you. But let's remember, he didn't want to play Kwanzaa. He didn't trust him. You can see that in the lack of game time last year. So having him there is a body that the manager doesn't feel he can trust and turn to. That in itself is another problem. It's why I've been saying this about Chiesa and Rio Ngamoa. It's one thing, a fan base hearing that these guys are alternatives and options, but it's another thing when the manager's not giving them minutes in games that matter. So let's see what happens with Federico and his minutes over the season. But Kwanzaa, I don't think, would have solved it, because the manager didn't feel that he was ready to play, and that's what we seen last season. Itachi said, what does Newcastle think? Yes, we have a striker, but that striker doesn't want to be here. We have a striker, but he won't play. Come on, grow up. I know. If somehow they think this is a show of strength, it isn't. It's a show of stubbornness that does not look well to agents and other players. And this has been written about and spoken about extensively. As I've said to you guys before, I have some contacts in football. Some of them are lower tier agents, and this has been spoken about in that world. Do you look at Newcastle, if you have an up-and-coming talent now, as a destination for your player? Because if the player does well there and a Real Madrid comes a-knocking, or, Liverpool comes a-knocking, are we going to be back to square one here? Are they going to kick up a fuss again and we have Isak 2.0? They need to be self-aware enough to think about that as well. Jay, how are we, Jay? JZ Hawk, thank you, mate. Said, are we in a position where maybe Liverpool have shown too much loyalty to Isak and feel it's bad for future signings if we leave after all he's done? Oh, there's definitely a case to be made for what you said there. No, I wouldn't say too much loyalty, but I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying. We did it with Virgil as well. Virgil went out on a limb, if you remember, didn't train with the Southampton team and, was reintegrated back in, but eventually left. So I would imagine it's a similar type of situation here. So if we don't get Isak, I do think we pivot to a different position and revisit it again. But it's a good point you've made, and I think a few people in the chat have made it as well. David said 140 million bid and keep looking. Yeah, at least got to get the bidding part done, right? We got to at least have a go at that. Sitting around doing nothing now. Granted, maybe you're observing if you're Liverpool, but, clocks are ticking. Dennis said, trust the process, things will fall into place. Ibu being offered around clubs, PSG, step up interest. So Dennis, absolutely right to point out about the process, because you know what? I do trust Hughes. I do. I think he's earned that trust with the way he's worked in this window. And there's only been glowing references from other clubs and people who he's been out there working with this window. So I want to trust the process, Dennis. I do. I really, really do, mate, because, we spent big money on good players. But again, I'd be a liar, mate, if I told you that to me, the whole window doesn't sit on these last 12 days, because it does. It's either a great window or an almost window with still some concerns for the season. Tomo said, Craig, if not Isak, which four do you think we'll get? I mean, Rodrigo feels like a potential. Look, fantasy manager moment for a minute. If I'm Liverpool right now and I'm Richard Hughes, I look around and I see Canade with no new contract. Whether that's a difference in valuation, you'll know at this point if you're Liverpool if you're willing to pay what Canade wants. So, seems like we're not. So if you get to the point where he's still stalling, here's what I'd do. I would look to Real Madrid to see if we can figure out something for... Oh, we're back, sorry. I got booted off at my side, just making sure I was still live, sorry. I'd look to Real Madrid and say, look, you want Canade. Is there anything to be done here for Rodrigo? One in, one out kind of thing. And then go get Marquez. That's the fantasy manager, fan idea. But how feasible that is in the real world, I don't know. So, Trey said, Pep is the best manager for a reason. If a player doesn't be there, he sells. Newcastle should take notes on how the best operate. I think most top managers, Trey, would probably agree with your sentiment there, but you also have to have good ownership with knowledge of how these things usually pan out to back you. And he's always had that, to be fair, Pep, whether it be at Barca, Bayern, Manchester City. He's always had an ownership group that know to trust him, because he's earned the right to be trusted. And if he doesn't want an unsettled squad, then get rid of the player. And, it's probably the right way to look at it. If a player doesn't want to be at your club and you can get the money, then, move them on. I agree with you. This one from Scratching Claimers said 150 million for Isak is way too much. An extra 50-55 mil gets us both Alvarez and Rodrigo. Both players want to play weekly. Let's negotiate on game time. So the problem for Alvarez, I don't think, would be a lack of willingness from Liverpool or a lack of desire. It would be, does he want to come back to the UK? I'm sure that if Richard Hughes' phone rang and he picked it up and it was the agent to say, look, my client Julian Alvarez actually, he would love to come and play for Arsenal, I think you'd see that move quickly, because we've had a long-held interest in him. And there were reports, I think it was from Sam Maguire, that last season there was a conversation between us and Manchester City about Diaz going in one direction and Alvarez going in the other. But it didn't get up off the ground for whatever reason. Sorry, I'm just making sure of a few other things I didn't get a chance to go through. So Costas, let's talk Costas for a quick second. Some reports that Marseille are interested in a deal for Costas. Now, I don't know if it's a permanent, I don't know if it's a loan, but they do apparently think he fits the style of the way that they want to play. Michael said, have to sign Isak, Rodrigo, Alvarez, otherwise failure. Don't disagree, Michael. Like you said, for me, Fofana's of this world just isn't going to cut the mustard, because it's not, a difference maker for the now, maybe for the future. But I agree with the three names you've mentioned. Has to be one of those three, or somebody we haven't thought of equally as prominent. Isak plays for Newcastle and gets 3 own goals. Could Prime Craig stop Prime Messi? Absolutely not. No. All I'd do if Messi was running at me, Benjamin, is take off my gloves, get down and bow in front of him like the legend he is. I would treat him exactly how he needs to be treated, mate. Prime Craig would just get down on his hands and knees and worship at the altar of Leo Messi, as I should do. Adam said, I think it's incredible for a fan channel getting the official rights of the Bundesliga. Fantastic achievement. I take it you're speaking about Goldbergs and that's football, and absolutely, it's certainly a step forward for... Look, I don't like Brent. Everybody knows that. Know why. But absolutely, it's a great step forward for fan content. And it's, yeah, certainly, I agree. I know you probably wasn't the correct one to say that, mate, because I can't stand the little lad, but it's certainly a notable step forward for fan content, and it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. Is Prime Craig better than Prime Adrian? Of course. Easily. Was there a Prime Adrian? What's this one? So, this from The Athletic. Newcastle's stance on Isak is they are unlikely to let him go unless they sign 2 strikers, one of Champions League quality, and got a £150 million offer. After missing out on Pedro and Ekitike and Sesko, Isak's exit seems even less likely. Well then, if this is the case, and this is what the journalists are writing and the media are putting out, then Liverpool have to pivot and move, because we can't afford to shit the bed in this window. Craig, would you go to the match on Monday? Yeah, of course I would. Why wouldn't I? For fear of what? A Newcastle fan? I can't live my life worrying about other people, mate. Yeah, of course I would. Like, either way, this is football. You know, I haven't slept with one of their sisters. I haven't. It's football. It's banter. I'd expect to be absolutely lambasted and rinsed, but I'm big enough and ugly enough to take that on the chin. But I'd never not do something like that out of worry. And I wouldn't besmirch the Geordies by accusing them of that type of behaviour either. You know, I'm a shithouse and I love winding people up, like, but it's football. This one from Marcus. People often say tourists ruin the atmosphere, but when I went to Anfield, they actually sang and shouted more than any of the locals around me. No hate towards anyone, but I'm honestly tired of hearing that stereotype. So am I. As a non-local myself, mate, I feel it's an easy card to play. The truth of the matter is there's a whole load of reasons around the atmosphere, and some of it, yes, is to do with people maybe who are just there, not even as a fan. Like, I don't think when people talk about overseas fans or non-locals, I think they mean the ones who don't really give a shit about football but are there for a life experience. I don't think they mean the Liverpool fan who's in Ireland or Norway or America who comes over and wants to be part of it. You know, I assume they're talking about the corporates, the executive type fan who bought their ticket for a life experience of, I've been at Anfield, look at these selfies. So I think the problem is multifaceted, and I don't think there's any one silver bullet that will cure all of it in one go. Some of it's to do with attracting the next generation of fans. Some of it's to do with, you know, making sure local fans can be seated together and, you know, have pockets of like-minded people to get the atmosphere going. Some of it's to do with ticket prices. You know, it's a multifaceted thing that I don't see being resolved anytime soon, unfortunately. Semenyo would fit our red kit really well. I mean, he would, but I just don't see that as an option. At least there you would think maybe Richard Hughes can get on the blower and ask on the QT about Semenyo because of his contacts at the club and all. But yeah, I wouldn't be expecting that to be a runner really. Stevie said, I think we're underestimating Leone. The kid's a unit. I just don't know much about him, Stevie. So, hearing that he's brought in for the here and now is, it's positive, but, I don't know enough about him to know if he will be ready or not. But I'm looking forward to seeing him because, like you said, 6'5", big fella, big reputation coming from Italy. And I said this when we signed him as well. Fair play to him. It takes a big character to think, I'm 18, I'm up in sticks, I'm leaving the country I know and the league I know to go to the best league in the world and play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. You have to have something about you to feel like you can go and do that. So fair play to him on the move as well. Right, ladies and gents, I'm going to go and go through the late night news update video. Appreciate you sticking with me. Apologies about whatever the mess was earlier on with the connection. I still don't quite understand what it was, to be honest with you. Yeah, so thank you to you all for coming in. I'll see you again tomorrow. And keep an eye out for... Oh, there's a super chat just come in. Thank God I didn't miss it because it's a 20 quid one from Nick as well. So bear with me and I'll read it out, Nick. Evening, Craig. Great stream as always. Would Isak and Ekitike play in the same starting 11 if/when he signs, are going to be a shared role? Apologies if you already mentioned it. So from my understanding, Nick, they could play together. He could play off the left and Isak could play through the centre. Or, like you've said, they could share the load a little bit. But there is a world where absolutely, like if I was putting together my best 11 and Isak was there, I'd probably have a decision to make on the left, whether I go Gakpo or whether I go Ekitike, but I love the idea. I love the options for the manager. And also, it's another good option from the bench at 60 because he feels like the manager feels at the minute like Ekitike can only do 60, 70. His words, not mine, because obviously playing catch up in the intensity of the league. So I think they could both play, mate, yeah. Right, as I said, ladies and gents, do drop a like for me if you can before you head off. And again, appreciate